Victoria the Queen, An Intimate Biography of the Woman Who Ruled an Empire, by Julia Baird. Hello there. Come, settle in for a story. It's one you might think you know, but perhaps haven't heard quite like this before. It's about a queen, an empress, a name etched onto an entire era, Victoria. But we're not just talking about the formidable figurehead, the stern face on the coin, the widow perpetually draped in black. We're talking about the woman. Imagine this: a cloudy spring morning in 1819, just before dawn. A baby girl is born, roaring into existence in a white room in Kensington Palace. She is fifth in line to the throne. Her father, Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, is the fourth son of a king descending into madness. Her uncles are known for extravagance and scandal, not stable succession. The hope of the nation had rested on another princess, Charlotte, who tragically died in childbirth just years before. This baby girl's chances seem slim. Yet, her father whispers, almost prophetically, "Look at her well, for she will be Queen of England." Fast forward 18 years. It's 2 a.m., June 20th, 1837. That same girl, now a young woman, is woken from her sleep. She walks downstairs in her dressing robe and slippers to find the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Lord Chamberlain kneeling before her. Her uncle, King William IV, is dead. She is queen. Later that morning, she faces a room full of the most powerful men in the land, her Privy Council, over 100 of them. She walks in alone, reads her declaration in a cool, silvery voice, astonishing them all with her composure. The Duke of Wellington would later say, "She not merely filled her chair, she filled the room." This is the Victoria that Julia Baird brings vividly to life in her intimate biography, Victoria the Queen. Baird peels back the layers of myth and misconception, the carefully constructed image, to reveal the passionate, stubborn, surprisingly vulnerable human being who ruled a quarter of the people on Earth. This isn't just a chronicle of dates and decrees. It's the story of a lonely childhood marked by manipulation and control, of finding unexpected love and grappling with its complexities, of devastating grief that threatened to engulf her, and of a resilience that saw her through 63 years of tumultuous change. By the end of our time together, you'll understand how that little girl, deemed a pocket Hercules at birth, developed the iron will to navigate court intrigue, political battles, and personal heartbreak. You'll see the passion behind the stoic facade, the surprising friendships, the moments of doubt and defiance. You'll grasp why this woman, who seemed an anomaly in a man's world, became the symbol of an age and left a legacy that still shapes our world today. Let's journey back and uncover the real Victoria. Victoria's path to the throne was paved with tragedy and chance. Her grandfather, King George III, ruled for 60 years but spent his final decade lost in deafness, blindness, and dementia. His eldest son, George IV, was intelligent but dissolute, addicted to opium, and locked in a toxic marriage. His only legitimate child, the beloved Princess Charlotte, died giving birth in 1817, extinguishing the direct line of succession. This triggered what Julia Baird calls a race for the throne among George III's remaining middle-aged sons. Most had lived lives of indulgence, siring dozens of illegitimate children who couldn't inherit. Parliament insisted the unwed brothers marry quickly and produce legitimate heirs. Victoria's father, Edward, Duke of Kent, was the fourth son. He was a tall, proud, disciplined man, a stark contrast to his debauched brothers. Believing he would outlive them, he saw his opportunity. Despite a decades-long relationship with Julie de Saint-Laurent, he sought a legitimate wife. He found her in Princess Victoire of Saxe-Coburg-Zollfeld, the recently widowed sister of Charlotte's bereaved husband, Leopold. Victoire was 32, cheerful, plump, and initially hesitant, but Edward's improved prospects and Leopold's urging convinced her. They married, formed a genuinely affectionate bond, and Victoire soon became pregnant. Edward, determined his child be born in England, rushed Victoire across Europe in the final weeks of her pregnancy. Victoria Alexandrina was born at Kensington Palace on May 24, 1819. From the start, her mother, the Duchess of Kent, doted on her, choosing to breastfeed, an unusual act for the aristocracy which also delayed another pregnancy. Her father proudly called her his pocket Hercules, but joy was short-lived. Seeking sea air in Devon, the Duke of Kent caught a severe cold that turned into pneumonia. Despite his wife's desperate nursing, and after being weakened by excessive bloodletting by doctors, he died on January 23, 1820, just 8 months after Victoria's birth. 6 days later, King George III also died. George IV ascended the throne, followed by his brother Frederick, who died childless in 1827, and then William IV. Suddenly, baby Victoria was third in line. Her widowed mother, Victoire, was left in a precarious position, nearly broke, in a foreign land, with few allies in the royal family. She clung tightly to her advisor, Sir John Conroy, her late husband's ambitious equerry. Together, they devised the Kensington system, a strict, isolating regime ostensibly to protect Victoria and raise her properly, but also aimed at securing power for themselves, hoping for a regency if William IV died before Victoria turned 18. Victoria's childhood was lonely under this system. She couldn't be alone, couldn't walk downstairs without holding a hand, couldn't play freely with other children. Her only real companions were adults, primarily her governess, Baroness Lawson, and her half-sister Feodora, until Feodora married and left. Victoria described it as a dismal existence. This isolation bred a fierce, sometimes volatile independence. She famously clashed with her piano teacher over the word must. Her conduct books reveal a girl prone to tantrums, very terribly naughty. Yet, she was also truthful, intelligent, and possessed a good heart. The one person she trusted implicitly was Lawson. Lawson nurtured Victoria's innate strength, believing weakness was unforgivable in a queen. Victoria adored dancing, singing, drawing, and opera, passions that offered an escape. Her uncle Leopold, King of the Belgians, became a vital father figure, offering advice and affection. She officially learned of her position as heir presumptive at age 10, a discovery that reportedly made her weep, overwhelmed by the responsibility. 3 months later, George IV died, and her uncle William IV became king. Victoria, now 11, was next in line. The tension between her mother's household and King William IV's escalated. The Duchess and Conroy paraded Victoria on tours, cultivating her popularity but infuriating the king. Conroy, fueled perhaps by the secret belief his wife was Victoria's illegitimate half-sister, grew increasingly controlling and insulting. Victoria came to despise him, seeing him as a monster who manipulated her mother. The breaking point came during a severe illness when Victoria was 16. While recovering at Ramsgate, Conroy and the Duchess relentlessly pressured the weak teenager to appoint Conroy her future private secretary. Conroy yelled at her, called her a fool, and physically forced a pen into her hand. Supported only by Lawson, Victoria refused. This act of bullying solidified her hatred for Conroy and her distrust of her mother. As her 18th birthday approached, the age she would attain her majority and avoid a regency, the battle intensified. King William offered her financial independence, but the Duchess intercepted and refused on Victoria's behalf. Victoria felt trapped and miserable. When she turned 18 on May 24, 1837, the threat of a regency vanished. Less than a month later, King William IV died. The transition was immediate. Summoned before dawn, Victoria met the Lord Chamberlain and Archbishop, shutting her mother out of the room. Her first act was to demand an hour alone and order her bed moved from her mother's room. She met her Prime Minister, Lord Melbourne, alone, establishing a pattern. Her composure before the Privy Council hours later became legendary. The country embraced their young queen with Regina mania. Victoria, finally free from the Kensington system, blossomed. She moved into Buckingham Palace, reveling in its space and light. Lord Melbourne became her constant companion, advisor, father figure, and object of her infatuation. He tutored her in politics, charmed her with his wit, and provided the affirmation she craved. She clung to his every word, recording his quips in her journal, loving him like a father. However, Melbourne's influence, while comforting, reinforced her Whig partisanship and insulated her from the country's social problems. He failed to mend the relationship with her mother and didn't prepare her for dealing with political opposition, like the Tories led by Sir Robert Peel. Victoria's first year was marked by public adoration but shadowed by private turmoil. The Hastings affair erupted in early 1839. Victoria, influenced by court gossip and her dislike for Conroy's circle, wrongly suspected Lady Flora Hastings, her mother's lady-in-waiting, of being pregnant by Conroy. The subsequent forced medical examination proved Lady Flora a virgin, suffering from a fatal liver tumor. Lady Flora died months later, and the ensuing scandal, fueled by political rivalries and the Hastings family's outrage, severely damaged Victoria's popularity. She was hissed at in public, called Mrs. Melbourne. Victoria, though eventually expressing some regret, showed a startling lack of empathy at the time, hardened by the public attacks and Melbourne's poor advice. Shortly after, in May 1839, Melbourne's government resigned after losing a key vote. Victoria was devastated at the thought of losing her mentor and facing the cold Sir Robert Peel. When Peel requested, as was customary, that she replace some of her senior ladies-in-waiting who were wives of Whig politicians with Tory supporters, Victoria refused point-blank. Encouraged by Melbourne, she dug in her heels, declaring "I never would consent." Peel couldn't form a government without this sign of confidence, so he resigned. Melbourne returned, but the bedchamber crisis was a constitutional misstep, highlighting Victoria's partisanship and emotional dependence. She had prioritized personal feelings over political necessity. By the end of 1839, Victoria was weary, her popularity tarnished. She needed stability. It arrived in the form of her cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Their union had been orchestrated by Uncle Leopold since childhood. Victoria had met Albert briefly in 1836 but wasn't keen on marriage, enjoying her independence. Albert, tired of waiting, arrived in October 1839 intending to seek clarity. Instead, Victoria fell instantly and passionately in love. The serious, handsome Albert, now 20, captivated her utterly. Just 5 days after his arrival, she proposed to him as protocol dictated for a reigning queen. He accepted, charmed by her joyous openness. Their engagement was filled with ecstatic pronouncements from Victoria and more reserved, though genuine, affection from Albert. Marriage brought new challenges. Albert, intelligent and ambitious, chafed at his initially powerless position as only the husband, and not the master in the house. Victoria, while deeply in love and willing to vow obedience, was fiercely protective of her royal authority. She initially excluded Albert from meetings with ministers. But Albert, supported by advisors like Stockmar, patiently but persistently carved out his role. He sought structure, efficiency, and a higher moral tone at court. Victoria's first pregnancy soon followed the wedding, much to her initial dismay spoiling my happiness. On November 21, 1840, Princess Victoria Vicky was born. Albert was by Victoria's side during the labor and represented her at the Privy Council immediately after. During Victoria's recovery, Albert began taking over correspondence, reading state papers, and attending meetings. The birth of their son, Albert Edward Bertie, Prince of Wales, followed just a year later, in November 1841. Albert's growing influence brought him into conflict with Baroness Lawson. He saw her as meddling and undermining his authority, particularly in the nursery. After a bitter argument following Vicky's illness in 1842, Albert demanded Victoria choose between her husband and her former governess. Heartbroken but ultimately prioritizing her marriage, Victoria agreed to Lawson's dismissal. Lawson quietly returned to Germany, leaving Albert the undisputed head of the household and the Queen's chief advisor. Albert became, in effect, co-sovereign. He established a close partnership with Prime Minister Sir Robert Peel. Together, they navigated complex issues like the repeal of the Corn Laws which Albert supported, attending the key debate in the Irish famine where Victoria expressed sympathy but shared common prejudices. Albert pushed for social reforms, improved workers' housing, and modernized palace administration. Victoria, increasingly relying on him, described him as her permanent minister. Their desks were pushed together. They worked side by side. Their family life provided a popular image of domestic bliss, contrasting sharply with previous royal scandals. They purchased Osborne House on the Isle of Wight as a private retreat, where Albert oversaw designs and gardening. They discovered Balmoral in Scotland, falling in love with its wild remoteness. Victoria shed formality there, befriending local gillies, including John Brown. Despite her public role, Victoria craved this simple, cozy life. 9 children were born in 17 years. Victoria found constant pregnancy burdensome, the shadow side of marriage. Albert, however, was a remarkably involved father, organizing education, playing with the children, and providing tender care. Their differing temperaments still caused friction. Victoria's passionate outbursts combustibles baffled the rational Albert, who urged self-control. In 1848, revolution swept Europe, toppling monarchies. France's King Louis Philippe fled to England, seeking refuge with Victoria. Britain remained stable, partly due to the monarchy's respectable image and reforms like Peel's repeal of the Corn Laws. Albert, disturbed by the unrest, advocated for improving working-class conditions to prevent revolution. Victoria, horrified by the dreadful rabble, urged firmness. Albert's crowning achievement was the Great Exhibition of 1851. Held in the magnificent Crystal Palace, a vast structure of iron and glass erected in Hyde Park, it showcased global industry, art, and invention. It was Albert's vision, realized against significant opposition. Victoria was ecstatic. "The happiest, proudest day of my life." The exhibition cemented Albert's reputation and symbolized Britain's industrial might and global reach. The 1850s saw Britain drawn into the Crimean War 1853-56 against Russia, allied with France and the Ottoman Empire. Victoria followed the conflict intensely, visiting wounded soldiers, arguing for more troops, and corresponding with commanders. The war exposed shocking military incompetence and horrific medical conditions, famously tackled by Florence Nightingale. Victoria admired Nightingale but was initially jealous of her fame. The war also sparked xenophobic attacks on Albert, accusing him of pro-Russian sympathies and undue influence. Victoria fiercely defended him. In 1857, she finally secured him the title Prince Consort. As the decade closed, shadows gathered. Albert's health deteriorated under his relentless workload. He suffered chronic stomach issues, insomnia, and bouts of depression. The behavior of their eldest son, Bertie, caused deep anxiety. In late 1861, Albert confronted Bertie over his affair with Nellie Clifton, then traveled to Cambridge in the rain to reconcile with him. He returned fatally weakened. Shortly after, Albert played a crucial role in averting war with the U.S. over the Trent affair, redrafting a diplomatic dispatch despite his illness. It was his final act of statesmanship. Diagnosed with typhoid fever, he declined rapidly. On December 14, 1861, with Victoria kneeling beside him, Albert died at Windsor Castle. He was 42. Victoria's grief was catastrophic and all-consuming. "My life as a happy person is ended," she cried. She plunged into decades of mourning, retreating from public view, preserving Albert's rooms as shrines, wearing black perpetually. Her seclusion damaged the monarchy's popularity. Republican sentiment flickered. She clung to Albert's memory, commissioning memorials and biographies, attempting to rule according to his imagined wishes. She felt utterly lost without him. "There is no one to call me Victoria now." Her children suffered under the pall of her grief. Bertie, blamed for contributing to Albert's death, faced her lasting coldness. Princess Alice became her mother's devoted companion, sacrificing her own needs. Victoria's intense mourning, while perhaps amplified by personality, reflected the era's elaborate grief rituals but exceeded even Victorian norms. Gradually, other figures filled the void. John Brown, the Highland Gillie, summoned to lead her pony, became her closest companion for 18 years. His bluntness and unwavering loyalty provided comfort, but their intense, unconventional relationship fueled scandalous rumors. Victoria ignored the gossip, finding solace in his strong arm and wise advice. His death in 1883 devastated her anew. Politically, she clashed fiercely with the Liberal Prime Minister William Gladstone. She found him condescending, addresses me as if I were a public meeting, and disagreed strongly with his policies, especially his push for Irish Home Rule. Their relationship was one of mutual antagonism. In contrast, she adored the conservative Benjamin Disraeli, who became Prime Minister in 1874. He flattered her, entertained her with witty political narratives, and shared her imperial ambitions, making her Empress of India. His death in 1881 left another void. Despite her seclusion, Victoria remained politically engaged, corresponding voluminously with ministers, asserting her constitutional rights to be consulted, to encourage, to warn, and often pushing those boundaries. She played a key role in mediating compromises like the 1884 Reform Bill and exerted significant influence, particularly in foreign policy and appointments. Later, the young Indian clerk Abdul Karim became her munshi, teaching her Hindustani and providing companionship. This relationship also caused friction within the household, who saw Karim as manipulative and potentially dangerous, but Victoria defended him against prejudice. As she aged, Victoria became the grandmother of Europe, her descendants marrying into royal families across the continent. She celebrated her golden 1887 and diamond 1897 jubilees with massive public displays of imperial pride, though she herself preferred her simple bonnet to a crown. These events cemented her status as a beloved, almost mythical figure. The end of her reign was overshadowed by the Boer War 1899–1902. Victoria followed it anxiously, supporting her troops but unaware of the controversial tactics, like concentration camps, being employed. The war strained the empire and marked a turning point in Britain's global dominance. Victoria's health finally failed in late 1900. Suffering from cerebral degeneration, she grew weak and listless. She died at Osborne House on January 22, 1901, aged 81, surrounded by her family. Her 63-year reign, the longest in British history until Elizabeth II, was over. Her funeral was a vast, silent outpouring of national grief. She was buried at Frogmore Mausoleum beside Albert, dressed in her white wedding veil, with mementos of both Albert and John Brown secretly placed in her coffin. And so, the curtain falls on an extraordinary life. Victoria. The name itself seems to carry the weight of an entire century, an age of iron and steam, of empire and invention, of profound social change wrapped in a veneer of stability. Julia Baird's biography masterfully shows us the woman who is both the symbol of that age and, in many ways, surprisingly apart from it. What strikes me most, looking back on her long journey, is her sheer endurance. She wasn't born into an easy situation. Her childhood was marked by a kind of gilded cage, full of tension and manipulation. She ascended the throne incredibly young, navigating immense responsibility while still finding herself. She experienced the heights of love with Albert, a partnership that truly defined her and shaped her reign, only to face the crushing abyss of his loss. And yet, she carried on. For 40 years, she ruled as a widow, a role she embraced with a unique, if sometimes criticized, intensity. That resilience, that vein of iron noted early in her life, never truly left her. Her reign forces us to think about the nature of monarchy and power. She inherited her role. She didn't choose it, but she fiercely guarded its prerogatives. She wasn't content to be a mere figurehead. Her constant correspondence, her interventions successful or not, her insistence on being consulted, they show a monarch deeply invested in the business of ruling, even when she claimed to dislike masculine occupations. She was a paradox, embodying traditional female domesticity to her public while exercising considerable political power in private. Perhaps that paradox was part of her success, making female rule palatable in a deeply patriarchal society. We also see the profound impact of personal relationships on history. Her bond with Melbourne shaped her early reign, for better and worse. Her partnership with Albert transformed the monarchy, setting a new standard for royal duty and respectability. Her controversial friendships with Brown and Karim reveal her deep need for loyal companionship, her defiance of convention, and perhaps, her loneliness on that terrible height. Her clashes with Gladstone highlight the friction between monarch and minister, personality and policy. And what about the empire ruled over by this queen who rarely traveled beyond Europe? Baird doesn't shy away from the complexities. Victoria held progressive views on race for her time, despising prejudice. Yet she was the figurehead of an empire often built on exploitation and violence. Her pride in the empire, her belief in Britain's civilizing mission, sat alongside a genuine, if limited, concern for individual subjects, whether wounded soldiers or Indian servants. It's a tension that defined the Victorian era itself. So, what does Victoria's story offer us today, especially someone embarking on their own adult life? It shows that strength can be forged in difficult circumstances. It reminds us that leadership involves navigating complex relationships and managing personal feelings alongside public duty. It illustrates the enduring power of love and the profound, life-altering impact of grief. And it highlights the fact that even the most powerful figures are complex human beings, full of contradictions, strengths, and flaws. If you take one thing from her story, perhaps it's this: life will inevitably bring challenges, losses, and moments where you feel utterly alone. But, like Victoria, find your own vein of iron. Hold fast to your sense of duty. Find loyal companions, and endure. You might surprise yourself with the strength you possess. Well, that brings us to the end of our exploration of Julia Baird's Victoria the Queen. We've walked through the grand halls of palaces and peeked into the private heart of a monarch. But remember, this conversation is just the beginning. A summary, no matter how detailed, can only offer a glimpse. The true richness, the deeper understanding, lies within the pages of the book itself. It's there you'll find the nuances, the full context of her letters and journals, the moments that make Victoria truly come alive. This overview is here to help you decide if this is a story you want to immerse yourself in further. If Victoria's resilience, her complexities, or the sheer drama of her life and times have captured your interest, then I wholeheartedly recommend picking up a copy. Reading it isn't just absorbing facts, it's experiencing a life that profoundly shaped the world we live in. You'll find a link to the book right there in the description. And if you found value in our discussion today, if it sparked your curiosity or offered a new perspective, please do consider liking this summary and subscribing to Billionaire's Bookshelf. We journey through impactful books like this regularly, aiming to uncover the wisdom they hold. Let's continue learning and growing together. Until next time.